Now, eat from here.
The film begins with Caro Sweet, an 18-year-old girl narrating her thoughts on entering adulthood. She lives by herself since her parents, who are both lawyers, reside permanently abroad. Writing becomes her escape from loneliness as she yearns for love and connection. Early in the story, she recalls meeting Jonathan Miller, her literature teacher, who also happens to be a writer. Caro arrives early for class and finds Jonathan already there, even though the lesson won't begin for another hour. She casually tells him she's from Level Hill, a detail that fascinates him. After providing her with a list of books for class, she proudly reveals having already read them all, impressing him further. Shortly after, Caro's friend Winnie joins them. It's revealed that it's Winnie's second time attending this particular class. After a brief exchange during which Winnie's stomach growls with hunger, the two leave together to grab some food. While they're gone, Jonathan inspects the books Caro brought along. At that moment, his colleague Boris enters and asks what he's reading. Jonathan is holding an erotic fiction book, which Boris snatches out of curiosity and begins to read aloud before Jonathan takes it back. They then share some biscuits Boris had prepared. The scene shifts as Boris discovers one of Jonathan's books among Caro's belongings. He notes that Caro is the only person who's ever borrowed it from their library. Meanwhile, Beatrice, their colleague, is deeply absorbed in her work, seemingly indifferent to Jonathan's attempts to talk about Caro and her love of books, including his own. Beatrice teasingly mocks him about it before receiving a call from Amy. Growing irritated during the conversation, she pours a drink while Jonathan plays some music. As the tension eases, he recites lines from Under the Roofs of Paris. This inspires an intimate moment between the two as they dance and kiss, until they're interrupted by Beatrice's phone ringing again, prompting her to leave. Later, Boris and Jonathan sit outdoors near the courts discussing a less-than-stellar weekend Boris had endured. As their conversation turns toward the nearby woods, Boris jokingly claims the forest harbors ghosts and plants that feed on the souls of the dead. Their banter is interrupted when Caro emerges from the woods and greets them. Boris offers her some biscuits while playfully mocking Jonathan before heading off. Alone with Caro, Jonathan inquires if she ever feels scared walking through the woods alone. She responds with an air of confidence, quipping that she's the scariest thing in there.
I'm the scariest thing in there.
Boris encounters Winnie in a hallway. She flirts with him and expresses interest in joining his class for extra tutoring sessions.
What you want?
I want to get into your physics class.
What?
Later, when Caro encounters Winnie smoking near her house, Winnie questions her about her absent parents. Caro admits she's unsure how long they'll remain abroad. Winnie shifts to reminding Caro about balancing intelligence with appeal, even offering to dress her up to achieve both. As Caro works on an essay for her Yale application, she's stumped by a question asking about her greatest achievement. Struggling with ideas and failing to pinpoint an answer, Jonathan suggests she experienced something meaningful worth writing about. During their conversation, Caro bluntly asks Winnie if she truly plans on being intimate with Boris. Winnie confesses she's drawn to older men and intends for Boris to be her first partner. When Caro remarks how Jonathan seems to view her differently than other students, Winnie is skeptical. However, during class later on, Caro finds herself stealing glances at Jonathan. He eventually asks her to stay behind after school for a private discussion. Around this same time, Boris probes Jonathan about Beatrice and the novel she's currently working on. Jonathan invited Boris over for dinner and reminded him to take a shower beforehand. After Boris left his class, Jonathan turned on some music and began dancing freely. When he noticed Caro giggling from the corner of the room, they both ended up sitting on the couch together. Jonathan asked if she'd ever attended the poetry salon at Sally Barney's in the Victorian Village and suggested she visit the upcoming weekend. His main reason for wanting to see her was tied to a story she had written about a reluctant spider. As they chatted, Jonathan recited lines from her story and complimented her talent. He encouraged her to work on a new piece for her midterm, a short story inspired by her favorite author, emphasizing how it could contribute to her portfolio for Yale. During their conversation, Caro shared that she had read Jonathan's book and described it as a grand and tragic romantic horror. She even quoted lines from it, which seemed to catch him off guard. Jonathan admitted it was the first thing he'd ever written, but life, marriage, and teaching had caused him to stop writing altogether. Caro challenged him, playfully questioning whether he was inspired anymore. Later, Boris, Jonathan, and Beatrice went out for dinner at a place where Winnie happened to be their waitress. When Beatrice asked why their food hadn't been served yet, Winnie offered them a complimentary drink. There was visible tension between Winnie and Boris as they exchanged sneers, with Winnie even calling Jonathan a boring teacher, a comment that made Boris laugh.
You know, why can't you just be a nice, boring teacher like Mr. Miller?
Jonathan quietly mentioned to Beatrice that Winnie was one of Caro's friends, leading to a short discussion about Caro. At that point, Beatrice bluntly told Jonathan that he was better suited for teaching than writing. She assured him it wasn't that he lacked talent, but that he had simply chosen teaching over the craft of writing. The comments left Jonathan feeling offended. On Saturday, Cairo went to the poetry salon Jonathan had mentioned, hoping he might show up too. Eventually, he did. While observing the group, Cairo asked if Jonathan knew everyone there and jokingly compared the gathering to group therapy. Soon, a man named Elliot performed a play for the group. After it concluded, Jonathan and Cairo stepped outside. She admitted she had feared it might be bad but shared this while laughing softly. Meanwhile, Boris and Jonathan were later relaxing in their usual spot when Cairo brought them coffee. Boris offered her one of his homemade biscuits and she suggested he sell them as a fundraiser for his team. She even volunteered to help coordinate with Jonathan at school. At some point, Jonathan received a text from Beatrice proposing a weekend getaway. Soon after, Cairo and Winnie stopped by his classroom to find him rushing out for this trip with his wife. Cairo used the moment to ask for his approval on an author she had chosen for her midterm project, which led to a short discussion before he departed. Not long after this interaction, Cairo found herself at the center of another moment when Boris joined a conversation about the biscuit fundraising idea. She and Boris exchanged numbers to make planning easier.
You just gave me your phone. I could text you the specs. It'd be faster that way.
Okay.
However, when borrowing Boris's phone to call herself quickly, she teasingly tucked it against her chest before handing it back. Later that evening, while waiting for Beatrice to wrap up her work commitments, Jonathan got an unexpected call from Cairo using her own phone. She realized she had mistakenly left her device in Boris's bag and asked Jonathan to drop it off at her place on his way home. Under pouring rain, when Jonathan arrived at her house, the two shared an unexpected kiss under the downpour. Now back at her place, Cairo sat alone watching TV while reflecting on what had taken place. Concurrently, at his own home with Beatrice, Jonathan listened as she apologized for having to cancel their weekend plans because of work obligations. Later that night, after receiving Cairo's midterm story submission, Jonathan stepped outside for fresh air and began reading her work. The intimate narrative Cairo wrote was interpreted and brought to life by others in her story. While reading it, Jonathan found himself drawn in, his reaction betraying a personal connection. On Monday, Cairo awaited Jonathan in his classroom, her demeanor eager yet apprehensive. Jonathan, however, only offered her a cold greeting as he passed. Confronting her directly, he insisted that she select another author, deeming her story unsuitable. When he asked why she chose to explore that specific material, her response was simple yet loaded: it was about them. She tried to justify her work, explaining its thematic relevance and appropriateness within certain contexts. Unmoved, Jonathan demanded a replacement with a new narrative and author. He warned her that failure awaited if she did not comply. Frustrated and hurt, Cairo urged him to stop treating her like a stranger and to clarify his stance. In response, Jonathan doubled down, asserting that she must rewrite the story or fail her midterm. Their tension escalated as he accused her of immaturity, dismissing her effort as childish and labeling himself foolish for the situation they found themselves in. Cairo hit back, criticizing his own writing and calling him mediocre, a nobody. With tears streaming down, she dared him to fail her while standing defiant. Overwhelmed and heartbroken, Cairo left the encounter, likening her emotional turmoil to a catastrophic car crash. Once home, despair got the better of Cairo as she drowned her sadness in alcohol, her friend Winnie offering quiet companionship. Meanwhile, Jonathan arrived home and shared his own grievances with Beatrice over a drink. He recounted the contentious discussion with Cairo about her story. Intrigued, Beatrice asked to see the piece, and after reading it, probed Jonathan on how Cairo described him in the work. As Jonathan repeated lines from the story, Beatrice's teasing turned into something physical. She guided his hand toward a more intimate connection. Their moment was cut short by an interruption when Albor's someone close to them knocked and entered abruptly. Elsewhere, Cairo sought temporary distraction through Winnie. She convinced Winnie to text Boris while claiming drunkenness, fishing for his attention. Meanwhile, Beatrice noticed Boris smiling at his phone and inquired playfully about who he was messaging with, though Boris refrained from answering. Back with Cairo and Winnie, frustration morphed into an impulsive plan to provoke Boris' attention further by posing together provocatively with intent to make a statement. Cairo orchestrated the moment, with a picture sent directly to Boris from Winnie. Earlier that same day, in a bold move, Cairo had sent her controversial story to the principal. News of this reached Jonathan when he received a restless call via Beatrice. As chaos unfolded, Boris excused himself abruptly, leaving Beatrice's home without explanation. Jonathan confronted Beatrice about the ramifications of Cairo's actions, acknowledging that if she fabricated or exaggerated claims linking them inappropriately, it could severely threaten his career. Beatrice pressed him for details of past encounters with Cairo that might spark such accusations, but couldn't extract more than generalities from an uneasy Jonathan. Over the following days, Cairo stopped attending school altogether. Her absence hung heavily in the air, with peers noticing Jonathan's unusual melancholy despite his unconvincing denials when asked about seeing her. Matters escalated when both were brought before Principal Joyce for questioning. Cairo claimed Jonathan had handed her midterm assignments early and described their meetings before and after class as mentorship, revolving around literature, a reflection of shared passion rather than impropriety. She attested that he admired her intellect and viewpoints. Jonathan supported parts of Cairo's testament, but worked to draw clear boundaries, defending their relationship as entirely professional and appropriate within a teacher-student context. He acknowledged moments of interaction beyond the classroom, mentioning a prior visit to return a misplaced phone and highlighting a vacation plan abandoned amid rising tensions. When pressed about the story Cairo wrote and her intentions behind submitting it to authority figures, Jonathan firmly categorized it as unsuitable for academic standards while emphasizing his disapproval from the outset. But beneath these defenses lay an undeniable vulnerability. Jonathan keenly felt the precariousness of his position. Sitting under Principal Joyce's discerning scrutiny, he realized words alone might not be enough to salvage his career or suppress lingering uncertainties fueled by unresolved tensions with Cairo and the consequences of their complicated dynamic. Boris confronts Jonathan, asking if he's in love with Cairo, before admitting that he can't define boundaries, which is why he crosses them. Their exchange spirals into an argument, leading Boris to leave in frustration. Later, Jonathan confesses to Beatrice that he has been suspended, but their conversation turns sour and intensifies into a deeply personal fight. Amid the escalating tensions, Jonathan accuses Beatrice of being an alcoholic, prompting her to retaliate by calling him boring and blaming that for her drinking habits. This clash marks the beginning of their unraveling. In a dramatic turn, Jonathan confronts Cairo, questioning her motives. Cairo reveals she's planning to testify against him before the school board, claiming he underestimated her. When Jonathan threatens to expose something detrimental about her in retaliation, Cairo counters by blackmailing him with evidence involving her and Boris. She smugly declares this her crowning achievement. The movie crescendos with an emotionally charged sequence. Cairo stands on her bed, reading an introspective essay about her relationship with Jonathan. As these moments unfold, we see Jonathan lose his job, Boris and Winnie pass each other like strangers, and Cairo breaking down in tears as she catches sight of Jonathan at school. Despite her pain, she reflects on how the experience has transformed her. No longer merely a spectator to her life, she sees herself in complex roles: a hero, a villain, and a storyteller. This powerful realization becomes the cornerstone of her growth, leaving Cairo stronger, more self-aware, and ready to embrace her future with resilience. The story concludes with Cairo standing at the threshold of a new chapter, prepared to navigate the world on her own terms. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more engaging movie summaries. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.